channel last Saturday, but it didn't happen. So sorry about that. A few people have been asking where I am, and everything's fine. It's been very busy again. Today is Saturday, the 8th of July. I believe it's the 8th of July anyway. Basically what's been occupying a lot of my time lately is I'm actually going to be making a feature film next May, I'm hoping, and I'm in the process of just getting the premise right and creating a blog, an online blog, chronicling our sort of ideas and how we're moving along, building the idea, the script, the crew, and hoping to get some investment. So we're shooting a micro, low-budget movie. Hopefully, it's a scary film, something which is very easy to make with little or no money. So, if anybody's interested in looking at the blog, I can maybe give a bit more information as soon as I can. So on the subject of movies, I thought I would ramble about them, basically. So one of the questions that we often get asked, it's one of those famous dinner party questions. If you could save 10 movies from being destroyed, God forbid, what 10 movies would you save? Now that's a question I asked myself last week, and it's very, very hard to narrow your films down to 10. So I made a list and I started putting some movies on there, but then when I looked back I thought a lot of them are of the same genre. I've got a huge passion for science fiction for some reason. In general, American movies. I don't know why that is, but I think whatever your 10 movies are, you should stick with your 10 movies, because these are the movies that I will be watching for the rest of my life. So then I decided to maybe look at it by decade. The tweenies, the noughties, the 90s, the 80s, and so on and so on. But instead, I've decided to just come up with a random 10, in no particular order, of movies that I can watch over and over and over again. I think with newer movies, they've often got to prove their status in some way. I am a lover of new movies, of course, and I frequent the cinema. But in order for a film to make my top 10, it's got to somehow prove itself. It's got to stand out head and shoulders above the rest, do something differently, take me away on a journey, that kind of thing. And there's a few movies that have done that recently, but it doesn't happen very rarely, I think. So here are my 10 movies, which no doubt won't be your 10 movies. It will be interesting to know what everybody else's 10 movies would be. If you wanted to stick in the comments anything that you feel should be saved, or perhaps you could do a whisper of your 10 movies. Sounds like a good idea, yeah. So, further ado, I will start talking about my 10 movies. Now the first movie I'm going to speak about is a movie of the last 10 years. Like I've just said, there's not many movies, new movies, that really leap straight into the legend category. But this particular string of movies certainly have touched me very deeply. And the movies are the Lord of the Rings trilogy. For me, the greatest movie of our generation. For me, a fantastic, epic spectacle that whisks its viewers away into another world. That's so believable, and I absolutely love it with all my heart. Prior to seeing the movie, which came out in 2001, the original Fellowship of the Ring, I had not read the book. So a very controversial move, I know. There's lots of Tolkien fans out there, but I did not read the book. Maybe it was because it was too big. It was a doorstep, basically. I was very familiar with The Hobbit, which is essentially a children's book, I reckon, anyway. But Lord of the Rings really did do its job very well, and put New Zealand basically was a travel brochure, if you like, of New Zealand. Such a beautiful, beautiful country. I actually went to New Zealand in 2004 and travelled around a little bit, but I'm very glad that when I went to North Island, I went against the grain, you see. I started off in South Island after being in Australia and worked up. I worked upwards where everybody worked downwards. Trust me to be the odd one out. But I went against the grain and I ended up in Auckland last of all. But I'm very pleased to say along the way I did stop at a place called Matamata, which has the movie sets of Lord of the Rings, Hobbiton, and I took a coach trip out there. It's near a place called Hamilton, and it's called Matamata, which is basically a farmland. But what happened was New Line Cinema had not destroyed the sets. I think it was through some adverse weather, and they just didn't bother going back to finish the job. But the good thing is, back end was still there, even though it was basically a shell, but it was still there, and it was amazing to see it, and you could go right up to it. I'll put a photograph of me outside of the set of Bug End. At the time I kind of had longish, curly hair. I've got naturally curly hair, you see, but my hair was just wild, and a lot of the people thought I looked like a hobbit, which was quite amusing. So I'll stick this picture of me striking a pose outside of Back End. Not the best of photographs, and sadly that's the only real photograph I have of my time there. Yeah, you see, I took a digital camera with me and took loads of fantastic photographs of my relatives when I stayed in Australia, and of course my travels in New Zealand. And when I got back, I had to give the camera back to a relative, and I got all of the images put onto a disc. And since that time, the disc has gone missing. I've searched high and low, and I can't find it, so, that's too bad. Maybe I will find it at some point, but in the meantime, this is the So Lord of the Rings, how to describe it? If I had to choose a particular movie from the trilogy, if I wasn't allowed to select the whole three movies, I would probably pick The Fellowship of the Ring, which is the first chapter. My reasons for that is I believe it's the perfect standalone movie. Of course it all ends with it to be continued, but in itself it's its own entity, if that makes sense. It doesn't have the middle installment like The Two Towers, which ends in the middle of some action. It kind of tells its story. The ring is introduced, and the fellowship is made up, and then split. Then we kind of end the movie when the fellowship is split up, and Frodo and Sam are together and walking off towards Mordor. So yeah, that's the one film I think I would go back to if that was the only one I could choose from the trilogy. I'm very excited about The Hobbit, which opens in December 2012. I'm very excited and can't wait to see that. I've got a year to go and a year and a half to go, and I'm still excited about it. So excited about it. So Lord of the Rings, for me, it's the set design, the inspired direction and writing team of Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh and Philip Boyens. The fantastic scenery, which is New Zealand, and the performances, the set design, the music score by Howard Shore. It's perfect. It's got everything going for it, and I love it so dearly. So yes, I would say The Fellowship of the Ring from 2001. My second film is a movie which I didn't particularly hold much of a torch for when I originally saw it for some reason. It was alright. Back in the days of Betamax, when I originally watched it, I just thought it was alright. But my respect for this particular movie has grown intensely over the years, and I can look at it now and see how fantastically tight the writing actually is, the execution, the performances, the set designs again, and the stunts. And it's a Spielberg movie. See if you've got any clues so far. Particularly the stunts mention is a big clue. I'm a huge fan of Spielberg, and I figured, I'd have to cover him in some shape or form. But for me, this is the ultimate Spielberg movie. Of course, Jaws and Close Encounters and E.T. were all contenders, but for me, Raiders of the Lost Ark is the greatest film that Spielberg ever made, in my humble opinion. Why? I believe Raiders is the perfect action-adventure movie. It's got a really lovable hero who's very flawed. Indiana Jones, of course, expertly played by Harrison Ford. It was a role that was created for him, I believe. Brilliant combination of Spielberg and Lucas at the height of their creativity. It's exotic. It's got fantastic villains and good guys. It's got gutsy heroines and mysterious artifacts. And it's the perfect Saturday afternoon matinee movie, which of course it was inspired by all those serials of the 1930s. But I absolutely love it. I could watch it to death and never get tired of watching it. I watched it in high definition the other day. It was on BBC One, I believe. And absolutely timeless in every possible way. The iconic set designs, the falling boulder, the Indiana Jones on the wagon, hanging on the front of the wagon. It just goes to show that it's a movie that stayed inside of the consciousness for everybody who sees it, it seems. There's lots of sequels and imitations. While the sequels are good, they didn't have the same impact as Raiders for me. I mean, I love Temple of Doom and Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Skulls. I think are great, but I think that the writing of Raiders, very tongue-in-cheek as well, it's just a perfect combination. So yes, I would save Raiders of the Lost Ark along with Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. My third choice, looking at my little list here, here we go. It's what's considered as a Christmas movie from 1946. It's a movie about life, basically, and the fact that a small thing that we may do might have an impact on somebody else. And it is, of course, Frank Capra's masterpiece, It's a Wonderful Life. I carefully selected that movie for a lot of reasons. For one, it's not Christmas without it. I generally watch It's a Wonderful Life on a Christmas Eve during the day. It gets quite a few cinema releases here in England. It often shows up at the Tyneside Cinema, which is nearby in Newcastle. And they serve mulled wine for the performance as well, and a carol service afterwards. It's really sweet, and it's a lovely, lovely film to enjoy the holiday season with. The thing is, I don't believe it's particularly schmaltzy either. It's quite a dark story when you look at the nuts and bolts. It's something that every man can identify with. Discouragement, disappointment with the way that our lives can turn out. In particular, George Bailey, played by Jim Stewart, who is the perfect everyman anyway. But he starts off obviously with dreams of travelling and doing this and that. Very idealistic young man who slowly watches his dreams fade away, basically. He marries the local beauty queen, who's played by Donna Reed. And that's the first kind of notion of his wings being clipped. And then he accepts a job in his father's firm, and then before you know it, his dreams are gone, and he gets in a lot of trouble with debt and the company going under, and basically he realizes that he's got the greatest gift you could ever have, and that's life, of course, and a family who love him, and friends who love him, and a town where his identity is forged. It's a great film, and I always walk out with a little tear in my eye. Doesn't matter how many times I see it. I absolutely love it to bits, and it didn't take me long to write It's a Wonderful Life on my list. If you take away the holiday spirit away from it, it still stands up as a great entertainment. So yes, It's a Wonderful Life. 1946 is my third choice, along with The Lord of the Rings and Raiders of the Lost Ark. is a science fiction film from 1968. So this is a film which basically is as timeless as any movie could be. There's very small telltale signs that it's from the 1960s, maybe the hairstyles, but it's certainly not in the visuals as such. It's a film which is not exactly easy entertainment. It's very almost art house and visionary. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and plays upon the mysteries of life. And it is Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Stanley Kubrick is one of my favourite directors of all time. His movies are all absolutely flawless masterpieces in design. People argue that they look very clinical, which is Kubrick's style, I guess. There's not one thing out of place in his shots. And colour scheme. Now 2001 is a very, very special film, which astonished audiences when it opened in 1968. And it is, of course, a science fiction film, but it's so much more as well. I'm going to look it up in my little book and see what they say about it. Here we go. It lasts for a whopping 141 minutes and only ever won one Oscar for some reason. It won an Oscar for special visual effects. But basically, anybody who's not familiar with it, let's have a read of the synopsis, if you like. An artifact of evidently extraterrestrial origin triggers and monitors key stages on one man's journey from ape to star child. At the dawn of time, a mysterious monolith is the catalyst for an evolutionary leap in primates from scavengers and gather into tool-wielding hunter and killer. Many millennia later, a monolith uncovered by a geological team stationed on the moon alarmingly emits a short radio signal toward Jupiter. A manned expedition to investigate, impassively shepherded by Keir Dullea and Gary Lockwood while mission specialists slumber in status, is sabotaged by the spaceship's Discovery's psychologically disturbed computer, HAL. HAL is a great villain, and basically he's just a voice, isn't he? He's the voice of the computer, but very calculating and very evil. But yeah, Space Odyssey is very influential, obsessional, pretentious, contentious, bewildering, but forever fascinating. So yes, it's a wonderful film. I think everybody should see it once, preferably on a big screen. It was filmed, I believe, in 70mm. So see it on the biggest screen you can. It looks absolutely stunning in high definition Blu-ray. I really can't praise the film enough, but just don't expect to understand it. And if you do understand it, explain it to me. So yes, along with Lord of the Rings, Raiders of the Lost Ark, It's a Wonderful Life, I would save 2001: A Space Odyssey from 1968. So how many is that now? That's 4. My 5th movie that I would save is a comedy, and it's a Billy Wilder film. No, I love Billy Wilder. His Sunset Boulevard and The Apartment, just fantastic. He's got a grasp of comedy, even the blackest of comedies, and just really putting a twist on it. It was years before his time. I think Sunset Boulevard, with its commentary on celebritism would not be out of place today if it was made. And I think for that reason, his unique style has never really gone out of fashion. Most of his films are black and white, but this particular film is the original formula for its kind, and it is Some Like It Hot from 1959, I believe. So not exactly a new movie again either, but Some Like It Hot is perfect in its execution. And over the years there's been many variants of its story, including White Chicks was one of the later ones, I believe. But this story, two guys on the run from the mob go and join an all-girl band and turn up in drag, basically, to hide. And they inevitably fall in love with the singer from the band, who is Marilyn Monroe. So yeah, what can I say about it? Some Like It Hot. It did win one Oscar, and that was for costume. It was nominated for quite a few, though. Jack Lemmon was nominated, Billy Wilder was nominated as director, but it only won one Oscar. So let's have a look at the down in their luck jazz musicians Joe and Jerry, who are Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, witness the 1929 St. Valentine's Day massacre and flee Chicago with an all-girl band bound for Miami, posing as Josephine and Daphne. If you see the two guys, they would never pass for being ladies. I don't know what everybody in the movie's thinking, but they would never have passed for a movie for girls. Both are taken with sugar cane. It was Marilyn Monroe, of course, who's a vulnerable, boozy singer, but Daphne attracts the persistent attentions of a lecherous playboy, which is a great character played by Joe E. Brown. And things start to get more complicated when the very gangsters the boys want to avoid arrive at the Florida hotel for a gangland summit, and high capers sort of continue from there. If you haven't seen it, Some Like It Hot, please see it, and you will see what an expert comedy it actually is. So yeah, a very famous last line in the film as well, which apparently was written the night before shooting finished. And the philosophical revelation, if you like, is where Tony Curtis finally announces to Joe E. Brown that he's a man. He takes off the wig and he just shrugs and says, "Nobody's perfect." It's absolutely ingenious one line at the very end of the film. So yeah, Some Like It Hot is the fifth movie I would save from extinction. So what's that so far? Lord of the Rings, Raiders of the Lost Ark, It's a Wonderful Life, 2001, and Some Like It Hot. My sixth film is a film which I saw at a very young age. I was too young to see it on the cinema, but I think I saw it on television in the early 80s when I was quite small. And it's a film which has reinvented the cinema, basically. And the film is Star Wars: A New Hope from 1977. Now, a lot of people would probably have a Star Wars installment on their top 10, but I'm not sure how many would have A New Hope. It seems like Empire Strikes Back is the usual film that people go for. But yeah, it's great, it's a classic. But like Rings, I feel that A New Hope has a beginning, a middle and an end. It perfectly stands alone as a movie in its own right. Empire Strikes Back, for all its darkness and action scenes, again is a middle installment, and it kind of ends on that to be continued. But I kind of loved A New Hope as a kid, and it's got everything going for it once again. The visionary direction from George Lucas at the height of his powers is second to none. Okay, everybody can say he can't write dialogue, but the film is a space pantomime full of villains and goodies, and it's basically cowboys and Indians in outer space. No word of a lie, but its mythical structure has inspired it generations and generations of moviegoers. The films get a release on Blu-ray later this year, and I can't wait to see them. And I know Mr. Lucas has had quite a bit of stick about tampering with his movies and keep repackaging them and releasing them over and over again. I remember in the late 90s when the special edition versions came out, and when they did, I originally thought that they didn't look as good as the original version, but I've come to agree that he did that for a reason, obviously, because he wanted them to fit quite seamlessly with his new trilogy. Otherwise they would have stood out like a sore thumb. I recently watched the original version of Star Wars on a DVD, and it does look its age now. So yeah, I think the special editions definitely did the trick. The Blu-ray versions, which is the latest incarnation, for me is a must-buy. I must get, even just for this movie, but I must get them. I think they look absolutely fantastic. And of course there's now talk of Mr. Lucas doing 3D versions of the movies, starting with The Phantom Menace next year, and releasing each Star Wars film consecutively. Some people believe that you shouldn't tamper too much. I'm undecided. I'll certainly go and see it, even though Phantom Menace is not personally my favourite. I will go and see it. But Star Wars A New Hope, for anyone who hasn't seen it, who's been living on another planet for the last 30 odd years, is basically an epic story about the evil Empire and the Rebel Alliance as they battle in outer space. And basically our story picks up where Princess Leia is kidnapped by Darth Vader and the Empire. But before she is captured, she sends a message in little R2-D2 before he and his counterpart C-3PO blast off in a little shuttle to the planet of Tatooine. And of course the Empire follows their trail and tries to find the two droids who are now sold to Luke Skywalker, who gets alerted to Princess Leia's message and enlists the help of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Han Solo and Chewbacca, and together they literally decide to venture to the Death Star to save Princess Leia, but end up being instrumental in blowing up the Death Star itself. That's the movie in a nutshell. I'm not sure if I described it very well there, but yes, it's certainly a masterpiece film of high adrenaline, dashing heroes, beautiful princesses, dastardly villains. So yeah, my number 5 is Star Wars: A New Hope from 1977. Moving on to my 6th film. This film is from 1994, I believe, and this film, for me, is a wonderful story by Stephen King. It's one of his non-horror stories as well, which he seems to do very well, even though he's known as being a horror writer. But the film is the Shawshank Redemption, which was an absolute sleeper when it opened in 1994. I remember it being on the cinema and turning my nose up thinking, what on earth does the Shawshank Redemption mean? Didn't mean anything to me, so I chose to go and see something else. How wrong I was. When I caught the movie on video, I was blown away by the very simple story of an innocent man basically being thrown into jail in the Depression era in the Deep South, and basically all his rights and beliefs are questioned, and he's a marvellously complex character played by Tim Robbins, and his friendship with Red and the other prisoners is so beautifully orchestrated. Some people say it's a love story between two men. Maybe it is, but it's a story of friendship and hope. And of course its famous tagline is, fear can keep you prisoner, hope can set you free. A marvellously wonderful feel-good movie in its climax, but it's quite a harrowing watch at times. There's nothing worse than being imprisoned, I could imagine, especially if it's something you haven't done. So for anybody out there, we can all identify with that kind of thing, whether you're trapped in a job that you hate, so quite metaphorically speaking, I think we can all identify with that, and maybe that's why that movie touches so many people, but it certainly touched me, and I love it and can watch it over and over again. So yeah, my 6th film is The Shawshank Redemption. My 7th film, I'm going to go for a scary movie, which I haven't featured yet. Scary movies are generally not something I can watch over and over again. Normally when you watch something, it's either not scary anymore, so you wouldn't bother, but there are a handful of films, scary films, that really made the grade and do bear consistent reviewing. There's lots of contenders for this. There's Jaws, of course, Spielberg's classic Jaws. There's The Shining by Kubrick. There's Frankenstein from 1931 with Boris Karloff and directed by James Whale. And of course, Hitchcock's Psycho, but I've selected a film which for me is a true horror film. Psycho, a little bit of a thriller maybe, more of a thriller, but I've selected The Exorcist by William Friedkin for a number of reasons. I think for its age it has retained a lot of mystique. It's still talked about to this day, and I think if you watch the film again, you get over the fact that it's got a few shocking scenes in it, but it's actually a fantastically executed story with fine performances. And again, I think the magic it holds is it's the mystery of life, a mystery of faith. Does evil exist? Does God exist? So those are fundamental questions that man has asked, and The Exorcist very manipulatively kind of taps into fears. If you're not religious, of course, it maybe won't affect you in that way. But I remember my parents being very wary of me watching The Exorcist, which made me want to watch it even more. It was nominated for 11 Oscars, wow, and one for screenplay and sound, but it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director. There's not many horror films can certainly have that accolade, filled with wonderful imagery. I would say The Exorcist. So yeah, that's my number 7. My number 8, moving swiftly on, is The Wizard of Oz, which is the perfect family movie from 1939. Absolutely fantastic, what can I say about it? Judy Garland is tremendous as Dorothy. It's filled with classic songs that we all know, and it's just wonderful. I think kids love it. Grow up and show their kids, and their kids show their kids, and it's absolutely timeless, as timeless movies can go. Completely iconic. So yes, I would say The Wizard of Oz from 1939, which of course is also America's first real fairy tale. And I think the movie now is equally as famous as the original story by L. Frank Baum. So Wizard of Oz is tremendous entertainment, and if you catch the Blu-ray version, it looks so pristine. It looks as if it was made yesterday. So The Wizard of Oz, I would certainly say, is my number 9. Is that number 9? So I've got Lord of the Rings, Raiders of the Lost Ark, It's a Wonderful Life, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Some Like It Hot, Shawshank Redemption, Star Wars, The Exorcist. Yes, this is number 9, Wizard of Oz. The last film I would save is The Adventures of Robin Hood, which was made in 1938 by Michael Curtiz. A perfect Saturday afternoon matinee movie. Very pantomime, but I love the gaudy colours of early Technicolor. Errol Flynn is so charismatic, and the original swashbuckler, can't say that word. And it's a story of heroism of the highest order, and moustache-twirling villains, set in merry old England. It's a wonderful story, but it was actually filmed in California, you see. But a wonderful story, and the best telling of the Robin Hood fable by far. So yes, if you haven't seen it, catch it. I'm conscious now that I've been running for 3/4 of an hour, so I will leave it there, and please feel free to let me know your thoughts, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.